Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of China Now, your essential news and current affairs show that brings you China's stories, strategies, and its view of the world. I am your host, Makiza Latifa, and it's always a delight to have you with us. We begin, as always, with China Currents, our fast-paced news roundup with Mimi. She's standing by with a dynamic lineup of the headlines making waves in China and beyond. Here's a quick look at what's coming up. And Trump backs down in the tariff war, leaving analysts questioning what's next for the US-China trade relations. Also, China steps up its cooperation with Latin American nations, expanding its influence in the region. Then discussions on Pakistan's recent victory, which has sent a positive ripple through China's stock markets. Huawei boldly challenges Microsoft's dominance in a new battle for tech supremacy. Also in the news, Chinese scientists have announced a major breakthrough in brain-computer interface technology. And then, China unveils a next-generation quantum computer designed to revolutionize healthcare and save more lives. It's a packed episode, so let's not waste a moment. Mimi, over to you for China Current.
China Current is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started.
Welcome to China Currents, your weekly news report on the latest developments in China. I'm Mimi, and in this episode, Trump chickened out in tariff war, China deepens cooperation with Latin America, Pakistan's victory boosts China's stock market, Huawei challenges Microsoft's monopoly, the new breakthrough of China's brain-computer interface technology, China builds stronger quantum computer to save more lives. First, the ceasefire of the tariff war. On May 12th, the United States and China issued a joint statement in Geneva. Both countries agreed to permanently eliminate 91% of their respective tariffs and suspend 24% until August 10th. As a result, China now imposes a 10% tariff on US products, while US tariffs on Chinese goods remain at 30%. A combination of the 10% universal tariff applied to all imports and an additional 20% related to the fentanyl issue that Trump has previously hyped. While Trump might claim a victory on tariffs, financial markets appear to interpret the outcome as a capitulation. As The Guardian noted, the US is not returning to the pre-Trump status quo. The White House hailed the importance of a sustainable, long-term, and mutually beneficial economic and trade relationship. The language was rather different to Trump's Liberation Day speech about the US being raped by nations near and far. In other words, Trump has learned how to moan. The dire warnings from retailers about empty shelves may have contributed to this miracle. On May 10th, CNN also reported that America's busiest ports have seen steep declines in traffic. Cargo volume at Long Beach is reportedly down 35 to 40%, while the Port of Los Angeles saw a 31% drop in shipments. On May 8, Trump addressed the situation at US ports, calling the slowdown a good thing because, in his words, we lose less money. He made no mention of the fact that China accounted for 1/3 of US seaborne imports in March and helped drive near-record ocean freight volumes earlier this year. This collapse in trade is now costing jobs, particularly among longshoremen and truck drivers. Sal Di Contanza, port liaison for the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, told CNBC, "Just today, we had somewhere north of 235 members who sought work but were not able to get it." According to FreightWaves, freight truck activity is now converging downward toward 2020 lockdown levels. Last month, Mack Trucks announced it will lay off 350 workers. Davis Express, a family-owned trucking company in Florida, announced it would shut down after 44 years in business, leaving 117 truck drivers suddenly unemployed. Trump may have the luxury of reversing course on tariffs from the comfort of the Oval Office. However, for the workers affected by these policy swings, longshoremen, truck drivers, small business owners, can they get new jobs in the White House? On the other hand, China is still keeping 10 to 15% tariffs focused on US agricultural products, meat, dairy, and timber, industries largely based in Trump-supporting regions. If Trump and JD Vance really care about US workers, they had better remain respectful to China. Next, good news for other countries in the Americas. On May 13th, the fourth ministerial meeting of the Forum of China and Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, was held in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the opening ceremony and delivered a speech. He noted that to support development in the region, China will provide over $9.1 billion in credit financing and offer 3,500 government scholarships and 10,000 training opportunities in China over the next 3 years. At present, within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative, China and Latin America have implemented more than 200 infrastructure projects, such as Changsha Port, creating millions of jobs. Last year, trade between China and Latin America surpassed $500 billion for the first time, more than 40 times the volume of the year 2000. Through trade with Brazil, Argentina, and other Latin American countries, China has greatly reduced its dependence on American agricultural products. At the end of the speech, Xi quoted a Latin American saying, "A friend is a treasure." He stressed that no matter how the international situation changes, China will always be a good friend and partner of Latin American and Caribbean countries. Next up, let's congratulate Pakistan. On May 7th, Pakistan shot down 5 Indian fighter jets without any loss. Pakistani Defense Minister told Reuters that their pilots achieved this glory with Chinese-built J-10 fighter jets. Following the statement on May 12th, shares of Chengdu Aircraft Corporation, the manufacturer of J-10, surged by nearly 20%. Indian media always vowed that French jets are more powerful than China-made, but now it seems that the only advantage of the Rafale over the J-10 may be its price. According to the War Zone, Pakistan's secret weapon is a Chinese PL-15E air-to-air missile. In terms of range, PL-15E is nearly 50% longer than the Meteor missile equipped on the Indian Rafale fighter jets. Nikkei Asia noted that Chinese weapons have long been criticized for lacking real battlefield validation. Now, with the courage and skills of Pakistani pilots, Chinese engineers have proved themselves. Moving on. On May 8th, Huawei launched its first personal computer powered by Harmony OS, China's domestically developed operating system. This marks the system's expansion from mobile devices into the PC market. Back on October 22, 2024, Huawei unveiled Harmony OS Next, the world's third major mobile operating system after Apple's iOS and Google's Android. While the original Harmony OS debuted in 2019, it relied partially on the Android Open Source Project, AOSP, a part of the Android operating system ecosystem. In contrast, Harmony OS Next is built by Chinese developers from the ground up, offering significant improvements in both performance and security. For decades, the desktop operating system market, especially in China, has been monopolized by Microsoft. In 2019, Windows accounted for 88% of China's desktop OS market share. In 2025, Chinese police released an investigation into cyber attacks that occurred during the Asian Winter Games. According to Chinese cybersecurity experts, the US National Security Agency allegedly transmitted encrypted data packets to specific devices running Microsoft Windows in China's Heilongjiang province. These packets may have been designed to activate pre-installed backdoors in the Windows system, triggering a series of remote attacks. The launch of a Chinese-made PC operating system is seen as a major step towards securing the nation's digital infrastructure. Today, the Harmony OS ecosystem has surpassed 1 billion connected devices. The platform boasts over 7.2 million registered developers, more than 110 million lines of code, and full-stack autonomy, spanning the OS kernel, file systems, programming languages, AI frameworks, and large model support. Moving on. On May 8th, Shanghai StareMed Technology announced that its invasive brain-computer interface (BCI) device has entered clinical trials, making it the second company in the world after Elon Musk's Neuralink to reach this stage in invasive BCI development. In a demonstration video released by the company, a test subject who has lost all 4 limbs in an accident is seen playing Mario Kart using nothing but his mind. By simply staring at the screen, he is able to steer the virtual race car via the implanted brain interface. No joystick, no controller, just pure thought. According to the paper, StareMed implanted 2 ultra-thin electrodes, each just 1/100th the width of a human hair, into the brain. These devices are connected to a coin-sized device embedded in the skull, which decodes neural signals and transmits them to external systems. Compared to Neuralink, StareMed's implant is about half as thin, and its neural electrodes are currently the smallest in the world, potentially minimizing damage to brain tissue. Professor Zhao from the Chinese Academy of Sciences noted that the trials are being conducted under the same regulatory standards required for medical device registration in China, aiming to bring the technology into actual clinical use. In March, China's National Healthcare Security Administration released a pricing guideline for neural system care services, specifying brain-computer interfaces as an independent category, effectively paving the way for this cutting-edge technology to benefit more patients in the future. Next up, on May 6th, Chinese scientists unveiled China's 4th-generation quantum computing measurement and control system, capable of supporting over 500 qubits. Often thought of as a neural hub of a quantum computer, the measurement and control system is responsible for generating, capturing, and regulating the precise signals that drive quantum chips. Powered by the system, quantum computers can offer computation speeds far beyond those of their classic counterparts. In 2023, Google introduced a 70-qubit quantum computer that can complete a calculation in mere seconds and take the world's most advanced supercomputer over 50 years. Thanks to this extraordinary computation capability, quantum computers play a pivotal role in biopharmaceutical research. This is because drug development relies heavily on massive data analysis and complex molecular simulations, tasks that traditional computers cannot process efficiently due to their limited power. On April 24th, Chinese scientists successfully demonstrated the use of its 3rd-generation superconducting quantum computer, 本源悟空, in breast cancer detection. It effectively improves diagnostic accuracy, significantly reducing false positives and missed diagnoses. Additionally, scientists use the quantum system to complete validations in other biomedical applications, including small molecule drug design and crystal structure prediction. According to the chief scientist at Origin Quantum, the company behind the technology, the 3rd-generation quantum computer 本源悟空, has already completed over 380,000 quantum computing tasks for more than 26 million users across 139 countries and regions. Its capabilities are being applied in finance, biomedicine, fluid dynamics, and more. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. See you next time.
And now it's time for the Thinkers Forum, the segment where global experts and thought leaders share bold ideas and fresh perspectives on the world's most pressing issues. We begin with Jim Hashlim, author of the book titled COVID-19, Mystery Solved. In this edition, he offers his insights into the origins, politics, and lessons of the pandemic, unpacking findings from his book and what they mean for the future of global health and diplomacy. Stay with us, it's a conversation you won't want to miss.
My name's Jim Haslam. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a virologist. I'm what's called a lab leaker. I'm someone that's spent a lot of time online debating the origins of COVID-19. And I've written a 450-page book coming to my own conclusion, which is pretty different than the mainstream narrative. So my narrative holds that this was an accident, but it was a lab leak. It was not a virus, though. It was a vaccine. It wasn't a human vaccine. It was an animal vaccine. I contend that SARS-CoV-2 was technically what's called a bat vaccine. That is a very crazy concept for a lot of people. This distant mammalian ancestor of ours, 65 million year old, bat, essentially, was this target of this vaccine that we now call SARS-CoV-2. So that is the book I've written, and there's a bit of a plot twist in it. So I start off this book in the here it is right here. I start off the book in the Wuhan BSL-4. This is the giant biolab that we've all seen on the pictures of Wuhan. So in the remote areas of Wuhan is this BSL-4, and inside this BSL-4 was a Western woman. I'll mention her name. She's Danielle Anderson, and she's inside this BSL-4 from June of 2019 until October of 2019. And she left Wuhan in November of 2019. And she told the world later on she was working on Ebola. And we all accepted it because that's what you do in the big BSL-4 labs with the big BSL-4 spacesuit. And I noticed, though, that her story didn't quite add up. So I hit the rewind button when this document, this US-American document, was leaked about a year into the lab leak, September of 2021 to be exact. This DARPA diffuse document was leaked. And in this DARPA diffuse document, this US military document, there is a woman named Danielle Anderson in it. And I, cross-referenced it with the woman that's in the Wuhan BSL-4. And she had told us she was working on Ebola, but here she is in a US military document working on coronavirus. And she's doing an experiment with live bats with these novel coronaviruses. So that's where my interest really got interested in this woo-woo. I was intrigued by this woman's story not holding up. She's known as the last Western woman in Wuhan. So I don't feel bad for talking about her because it's not really her fault. This was an accident. But I'm going to basically proclaim that she was patient zero. Danielle Anderson was our first victim of many in this COVID-19 pandemic. She was inside this Wuhan BSL-4 experimenting with live bats, with this live coronavirus, with this fear and cleavage site right in the middle of it. And it got out on her watch accidentally. My evidence for that is it's thick, but it's enveloping to the fact where I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the pandemic started in her lab, at least. So what Wuhan provided, now because it started in her lab, I want to make this clear. It doesn't mean it was engineered in her lab. This is where it gets complicated. If something like a genome or a virus is ever engineered, virologists ship it around the world to test it. They freeze it in liquid nitrogen and they ship it around the world in the bottom of a plane, just like any other package. It's basically packed in solid ice, and it's shipped around the world for testing. So this isn't nefarious. All these labs just collaborate. This is Western science, in action. And this BSL-4 in Wuhan was built to invite Western scientists into the Wuhan BSL-4. So this was, open science, good science, hopefully safe science if something like this didn't happen. So just because it started in the Wuhan BSL-4s, which is what I contend, doesn't mean it was engineered or created in the Wuhan BSL-4. It just means she's testing it. She's testing the final product, this prototype, what I call this R&D accident. So she is on the receiving end of this vaccine that's been shipped to her from a U.S. lab. This is where my my narrative deviates from most others. If you interview another lab leaker, you'll claim that the Chinese scientist engineered this in a Chinese lab and it got out, and they'll claim that this thing has nothing to do with the Wuhan wet market, which I agree with. But what I don't agree with is that the Chinese scientists, engineered a genome like SARS-2. I actually contend it's impossible for a Chinese scientist to have engineered SARS-2. It's biologically impossible to have engineered a genome like SARS-CoV-2. And if you go through my book, COVID-19 Mystery Solved, there's multiple chapters outlining how that's possible. And to get further into the details of this, if anyone has been interested in the lab leak debate, they probably know of a woman named Xizing Li. Xizing Li is the bat lady of Wuhan. That is probably who people know about and have heard about. They don't know about Danielle Anderson, but they will know about Xizing Li. They are colleagues, not close colleagues, but they are colleagues. They both are what's called bat virologists, essentially. So they're peers, basically, and they work on international projects, and they cross paths in Wuhan like they did in this project. So they are both in Wuhan in 2019. There is Xizing Li, who's in the Wuhan BSL-2, that is near downtown Wuchang city center. And then you got Danielle Anderson. So when the pandemic started, this is in January 2020. Danielle Anderson has now left Wuhan. She is left without reason in November. The pandemic starts on January 10th of 2020. On January 10th of 2020, there's the first big event for the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. The genome is uploaded. The Chinese scientists have isolated the virus, this mysterious virus circulating in Wuhan, and they have uploaded this genome, this 30,000 nucleotide genome, this signature, if you will, to the databases. And when they upload the signature to the databases, Danielle Anderson's boss, Linfa Wang, stepped down as Duke's emerging infectious disease director. So the boss of Danielle Anderson has now resigned from his position at Duke, essentially, after recognizing the genome that got out on their watch. So he's done the honorable thing and stepped down. Then 2 weeks later, on January 24th of 2020, Xizing Li, the bat lady, emerges onto the international scene, and she uploaded this genome called RATG13. This is why I basically call Xizing Li the whistleblower. I have announced her to be the brave whistleblower, and I believe she may go down as one of the braver women in science for doing what she did. Because when she uploaded this genome, this RATG13 genome, which is about 96% similar to SARS-2, it's not 100%, but it's a close match. When she did that, she ironically made her own lab the primary suspect of a lab leak, because she had the closest known genome to any woman, to any scientist. So ironically, when she did this, she brought attention to her lab in the BSL-2. She brought hell upon her. So the entire world just descended upon her. You have the closest known genome to SARS-2. You are now our primary suspect. Said every Western scientist, every Western newspaper, every Western reporter. They converged upon her for the irony of her actually, exposing the fact to us, Western virologists in particular, that SARS-2 is engineered. She ironically brought attention to her. Does that make sense? She basically goes down, with this just nightmare of a firestorm brought upon her for doing this pretty brave act. Because when she uploaded this genome that made SARS-2 look engineered, one of the Western scientists wanted her arrested. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. So when I contend that SARS-2 wasn't created or engineered in Wuhan, I'm going to tell you it was engineered in U.S. labs. And one of the two people that I can name names, because it's pretty clear who did this. The guy that created the genome is Xizing Li's colleague in North Carolina. His name is Ralph Barrick. So he's been in Chinese newspapers. Don't worry, the Chinese media know who Ralph Barrick is. So he is this coronavirologist. He's basically specializes in coronaviruses for the past 40 years. So he's been doing it since coronaviruses have been around, or at least recognized in circulation. And he's one of the few, if not the only scientist on the planet that could have created a genome like SARS-2, because it's so new, so novel, so different. No one could create anything like this other than him. So this Ralph Barrett character is a professor at the University of North Carolina. And he wrote this DARPA, this U.S. military proposal in 2018. And he said, I, Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina, I'm going to insert the fear and cleavage site, what I just showed you on the back of the book. And I want to test it on live bats in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Why? This is where it gets a little weird, but it's just the Chinese horseshoe bats. This horseshoe bat is this about as big as your fist, and it's very small and very fragile. But it is the source of what's called SARS-1. That virus, that SARS-1 virus, was traced by Xi Jinping, the bat lady of Wuhan, back to Chinese horseshoe bats. And these Chinese horseshoe bats are in the remote Yunnan province, which is about 1,500 kilometers south of Wuhan. But Xi Jinping would go out there from 2005 until 2015 for Ralph Barrett, for the NIH in America, for U.S. scientists. She would go out there and collect bat samples from these bats. And one of these bat samples she collected was this RATG13 genome I keep talking about. And she collected this RATG13 genome in 2013, hence the name. So when she collected it, she brought it back to Wuhan. And she didn't do anything with it until 2018. She started to upload it, but she uploaded it to US databases in 2018. So when she starts to upload these genomes to these databases, it gives Western scientists access to them before they're published, which is what happened in this case. Xi Jinping didn't do much of anything to cause any pandemic other than she uploaded this RATG13 genome. She was paid to do this. This is what the US scientists, the US government actually wanted her to do, to go out there to the bats, find these SARS-like samples, collect them, bring them back to Wuhan, sequence them, and then upload them up to the database for scientists like Ralph Barrett at the University of North Carolina to download it. And when Barrett can download the genome, he can recreate it. He can recreate a Chinese virus in his North Carolina lab. That's how good he is. Xi Jinping could not isolate or create the genome, but Ralph Barrett in North Carolina could. So if she uploads it, Ralph Barrett can download it. He can create it and modify it and play with it, which is what he wanted to do. He declared this intent to modify this genome, this RATG13 genome, and put a furin cleavage site in it, send it back to Wuhan, send it to Daniel Anderson and the BSL-4, which was safe. It's a higher level security lab. It's more secure. At least that was the idea. No one set out to blow up the world or whatnot. No one set out to frame the Chinese. Unfortunately, this is kind of what happened. And Daniel Anderson was to experiment with this novel chimera we now call SARS-2. That was her responsibility. And what Wuhan and Xi Jinping were able to provide were the live bats, the bats where the genome came from. So the genome's taken from the bat. It's uploaded to the database. Ralph Barrett downloads, modifies, then he sends it back to Wuhan. But this time it goes from BSL-2 to Ralph Barrett, from Ralph Barrett to the BSL-4. It's a little confusing, but that's essentially what happened in this case. And that was the intent of this program, was to try and prevent the bat from producing another SARS-like event. They wanted to vaccinate the bats. And this is what's outlined in this U.S. military proposal called DARPA Diffuse. And it usually ends because DARPA, this U.S. military branch, did not fund the grant. And no, that's true. They did not. But NIH, NIAID, Tony Fauci did. And that's that's where I start the book. And that's where I move us down the path, hopefully, to where the story gets really good, which I don't really want to talk about here because it gets even more crazy when you get into the details of it, because there's more than just North Carolina involved. Tony Fauci, this pope of biodefense in America, is also heavily involved in this. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Without overwhelming your viewers and listeners, I am here to tell you with biological fact and 400 pages of evidence, the Chinese scientists did not create SARS-CoV-2, nor did the Wuhan wet market. I have evidence pointing away from the Wuhan wet market and evidence pointing towards, U.S. scientists and away from the Chinese scientists. I did not care who did this. I just wanted to know who did. And over time, it was, more and more documents came out. When I looked at lab leak, let me put it to you. When I looked at the origins, and I always assumed lab leak, because it's just, there's 12 biolabs in Wuhan, and I always assumed it just came from one of them. But I never thought we would figure out which one, because you can't get to the bottom of it. It's no one's going to admit it. The documents, if they exist, are gone. So I thought there was no interest in it. I got interested when the DARPA Diffuse document leaked in 2021. That's late 2021. And all the other lab leakers ignored it. Lab leakers are people that spend time like on Twitter per se, and they debate the origins down to the nucleotide. And I was one of them passively paying attention. But when the DARPA diffuse document leaked, I go, this is big. This is huge. This is now, a 2018 document saying that U.S. scientists are going to create something like SARS-CoV-2. And everyone else just kind of ignored it because I don't even know if they wanted to look that deep into it. But as everyone else ran away from it, I ran towards it. And that really piqued my interest because then that would check a lot of boxes for me. Why were Western scientists covering up something that I believe to be a lab leak in Wuhan? Why would they fight so tooth and nail for that? It just smelled funny. Then I like the story of the guy that leaked the document. His name is Major Joseph Murphy. He's the American hero. If I got Xi Jinping as the Wuhan hero on the Chinese side, I've got Major Joseph Murphy on the American side. He's the American hero in Chapter 7. And he's basically this DARPA fellow. He was an intern at the DARPA military office, which the DARPA is like the brain of the Pentagon. The Pentagon is this. We all know the Pentagon. It's the U.S. military fort. But inside this fort of the U.S. military is this small, nimble entity called DARPA. Defense. I can't even give you the name of the acronym out loud. But it's basically like Google, Siri. Drones, drone warfare, machine guns, all these dual use technologies that come out of this tiny little nimble, department called DARPA. And Major Murphy was a fellow, an intern there. And he smelled a rat, an American rat, basically involved in this. I don't know how, but he's sitting in the back of the DARPA rooms, as he wrote in his letter, and he pieced it together. And he noticed that there's immune evasion in this genome, or this virus. And he says immune evasion is like asymptomatic spread. We spread the virus without knowing we have it. He saw that was a very weird feature of SARS-CoV-2, the asymptomatic spread. And it led a lot of lab leakers like myself to assume bioweapon. That's where, people get their PLA, Chinese military, that's the brain just starts going into overdrive when they see immune evasion, because there's really nothing moral about immune evasion. Well, there is. In a vaccine, scientists design immune evasion, asymptomatic spread. That is a feature, not a bug. In an animal vaccine, in particular, in a self-spreading animal vaccine, you want immune evasion. Immune evasion means the virus does not trigger the immune system. Now, it wasn't a human immune system it was designed for. It was a bat's immune system, a mammal just like you and me, basically. But we have a very similar immune system. This is why virologists love studying bats. So there was the virus, the vaccine was designed to evade the immune system, so it would keep spreading and keep shedding. So that was a feature, not a bug. And that's what Major Joseph Murphy in the DARPA department picked up on. And he found the DARPA document and he wrote his letter saying it's an American created recombinant bat vaccine. And I go, this guy is onto something. And the only thing he had wrong in his theory about the American created bat vaccine was it doesn't infect bats. That's what he said. And I go, well, it doesn't affect Chinese horseshoe bats, but it does affect American lab bats. That's what I brought to the table. That's my biological evidence for this thing being a U.S. lab creation. SARS-CoV-2 does not infect Chinese bats. Even though it allegedly came from a Chinese bat, like a Chinese horseshoe bat, it does not infect them. I've asked British bat biologists living in China, 2 of them in particular, I won't say who, does it? And they have not answered, because it doesn't, because no one's tested it. Because if someone did prove that it did, they would gladly publish the results. So no one anywhere in China or anywhere in the world has proven that SARS-2 infects Chinese bats. But SARS-2 does infect American lab bats. That's my evidence that I propose to you at the beginning and the middle of the end of the book. There's this particular bat. I won't name it, but it's a special bat. It's an American bat, a fat, easy to breed, easy to feed kind of bat. It's like a low maintenance bat that you don't have to keep up, with a lot of, high work and high maintenance. So this particular bat is kept in biolabs, in U.S. biolabs, in particular, Tony Fauci's biolab. It's an info war. There's no doubt about that. It's a full on info war. There was a Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in the 80s. Cold War meaning no shots were fired, but they were kind of like playing spy games amongst each other, hot air balloons, big, jets, big, rockets, going to the moon. That was the Cold War. With China and the U.S., it's going to be an info war, maybe a tariff war. It's going to be some other kind of hybrid war, but I don't think it's going to be biowarfare. No, I mean, biowarfare is, it's not effective. It's just really not. We've seen that happen. I mean, everyone's economy was screwed up by this. Everyone's people died because of this. Everyone was infected because of this. You cannot control the genome once it's out of the box. I mean, biowarfare is just not effective because it's not targeted, so it's not an effective warfare apparatus. Don't get me wrong, it was done. I think there's a nasty history with the Japanese and the Chinese, and there's a nasty history between the U.S. and Cubans. 731. We all know about the Japanese lab, and there's something similar going on with the U.S. and Cubans. So Cuba is this island right off the coast of Florida. So we've done some nasty. The Americans have done some nasty bio warfare, or talked about doing some nasty germ warfare, like kill the crops kind of thing. Starve the people. Unless Fidel Castro goes over. So I think biowarfare had its place. It was about 50 years ago. I don't think there's anything like that war, but I think you nailed it, Woo. I think it's an info war. I think that's essentially what it is. We are stuck in an info war, and on the American side, it's tariff the Chinese because they're going to take your job. On the Chinese side, it's why are you taxing us? We provide you goods and services. So I think right now it's a bit of an info war, and I think. I don't know what happens, to be honest with you. I mean, who knows? I mean, I would never have thought Trump would get, into office and level tariffs, like this. And like you saw what happened. The whole market just it totally implodes. At least the stock market does. And I don't think he cares, if you want to know what Donald Trump is, I don't want to talk politics too much, but he's what's called an isolationist. He's basically, a person that he has dovish tendencies. So let's not think that he wants war with China. But he does want a trade war with China. There's obviously something about that. He wants an info war with them. He sees China as a competitor. And I think, people like Jeff Sachs try to explain the way capitalism and free markets work pretty well. It's called trade. It's mutually beneficial. It's essentially called the division of labor, and comparative advantage is the term I think that Jeff Sachs will throw out as an economist. But you have to be an economist to know that. You have to study goods and services crossing borders and how it's better off this way. So a lot of Americans have been told the Chinese labor has taken your job. And it's a very popular political slogan. And it gets you elected to office, woo. Look what happened. Trump gets back in office. And not only is it important, it's important in what's called the swing states like Missouri and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Indiana. These are factory towns, or at least they were at one point. And you when you campaign in there as a president, you have to win the states. Like Florida and Texas don't really matter because they're always going to vote Republican. And the way you get their vote is you say, I'm going to tax the Chinese. We're not going to lose these factory jobs anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It never did. It never will. The factory job's gone to a more efficient place, whether it's China or Vietnam or Mexico. Most of the jobs have gone to Mexico. All those factory jobs, they're in Mexico and Canada too. So, not only is he taxing the Chinese, he was taxing Canada at one time. That's incredible. The biggest trade partner isn't China, it's Canada. It's just trillions of dollars in goods probably that go across that border over time. So, don't get too sucked into our politics. It's entertaining. I'll admit that. I think Donald Trump's all bark, no bite. I think that's essentially it. Like he's a dog that'll bark, but he won't actually bite you. So I would take none of this personally. I would take none of it, as any more serious than a politician just looking to say something to get a vote, really, which is unfortunate. A good voter is a terrible economist. So that's what Jeff Sachs is up against. He's trying to educate the world about the way economics works, and he does a good job explaining what is it, the trade imbalance. Essentially, America consumes more than it produces, so there's a trade imbalance. So we consume more Chinese goods than we produce. America does export. It does export like services, lawyers, COVID. Jet fighters and whatnot. But there is, movies, entertainment, Netflix, so there are exports there. It's more on the service side, apparently. We're all salesmen in America. We're all, selling something in America. That's essentially what we are, a bunch of talking heads at this point. We don't produce much of anything anymore. I can't say that, I've worked with some great American companies that produce some really good products. So you can really, be proud of that, I guess, from my perspective.
And next on the Thinkers Forum, we bring you an insightful panel discussion featuring voices from across the region and beyond. Joining us are Albert Wang, a respected current affairs commentator, Jolie of Wave Media, and George Yeo, the former Minister for Foreign Affairs of Singapore. Together, they dive deep into the ongoing trade war, the shifting tides of the global order, and weigh in on whether or not the growing sensitivities and uncertainties we are witnessing today should be a genuine cause for concern. It's an unmissable conversation. Let's take a listen.
Does the current trade war and the shifts in the global order, the sensitivities, the uncertainties, does it worry you for Singapore, for the prosperity of this region, including China?
I see something which may sound surprising. It is good that we have a trade war and not a real war, because the trial of strength between the US and China will have to go through a process lasting many years. And there will be many anxious moments. And in some of those anxious moments, there could be physical conflict and people could die. A trade war is good because it's only about money. And both sides can really manage it. Trump said, I decide. Because if the deal is something I'm happy with, we have a deal. China can also decide. If you are a businessman, if you are an individual, you may be hurt, but you only hurt in your pocket. You're not bloodied.
Remember on the first day after you arrived, we were having dinner. You said, actually, Albert, if you can back me up, we actually decided that we don't dislike Trump, like on a personal level. And I would say that most Chinese people, or at least the sentiment on the ground, online, is that people actually do not dislike Trump. And my take on that is, for China now, I think respect and honesty and honor means more than the physical interest, because what the Democrats or the United States used to do for the longest period of time after World War II is, including this time what was revealed about USAID, what they were doing around the world. That is claiming moral supremacy over other civilizations is what the Chinese people cannot live with. That's what they hated. So where Trump is, gloves off, let's fight. The Chinese people actually are okay with that.
And actually, from my point of view, that I think Trump is actually easier the counterpart. Trump is actually a much easier one to deal with.
No, I think you're right. They were operating a very sophisticated system. They thought they could dominate the world, and therefore they should dominate China. China refused. Then, for complex reasons, instead of concentrating on China by keeping close to Russia, they went after Russia. And this is China's good fortune. Then you had the Middle East. Both Ukraine and the Middle East, Gaza, are distant wars for China. China is not directly involved.
Yeah.
And they've taken the heat away from China. But throughout this period, the internal difficulties of the US got worse. The deficit increased, the social problems increased. And Trump was voted on the platform to revive American manufacturing, to solve the drug problem, to reduce the deficit. So he has no grand conception of US dominating the world. Secretary Rubio was the first Secretary of State to say that we are living in a multipolar world.
Yeah.
This is a big concession that the US administration has made. Future US administrations will have to work within this framework. It is a reality. And once you think in terms of multipolar framework, your strategy and your tactical moves all change. And we're seeing that in Trump. Now, Mao Zedong once said that he much preferred to work with Republican presidents than Democrat presidents because they are much more honest. And in the case of Trump, he's not ideological.
Exactly.
You can deal with him. He's got
Yeah.
a bottom line.
Yeah, he's very honest about what he wants and what measures he's going to take in order to get there. And there is no ideological supremacy, there is no hypocrisy, there is no intellectual control, mind control games that he plays there.
But he's a bully.
Yes,
Yeah, he is a
yes,
bully. He's a
yes,
bully.
yeah.
And his negotiating style is very aggressive. It's quite scary. I met a former Korean minister. He said, if Trump wants $2, he'll ask for 10. And he'll scream at you.
Yeah.
And you're so anxious. So in the end, you say, okay, you settle for $3. Trump has got $3 instead of 2.
Yeah,
Yes.
And you're so happy that you're only giving him 3
yeah.
and not 10. You see, that's how he negotiates.
Okay, where does Southeast Asian, ASEAN countries, Singapore, China stand with this bullying style of negotiators? There was a meme circulating somewhere, I forgot where, I just came across it. It said, I think it's a comedian or something. He said, hey, I know, Trump, you wrote The Art of Deal, but remember, China, they wrote The Art of War.
So who said that? A Singaporean?
No, an American comedian, one of those.
That's quite funny.
Yeah, one of those funny shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a funny thing that I remembered. So where do we stand against a negotiating bully?
Now, if you're a small guy
Yeah.
and there's a bully walking around, just stay in the corner. Don't attract his attention.
Okay.
It's not worth the while to attract his attention.
But it's
But if you have no choice,
Yeah,
and
that's
he's going
my-
after you,
Yeah.
then you've got to stand up to him. Because if you show weakness to a bully, he'll bully you more. Now, if you stand up to a bully, he may give you a punch in the face. Okay, you take the bruise. And you hit back, and then he'll be more careful next time. But of course, in the case of Singapore, we have ASEAN. And if there's a group of us who stay together, it's harder for him to bully us.
okay.
So ASEAN will become stronger, and ASEAN is getting stronger. Yeah. So Singapore's strategy is very simple. Try not to attract attention and work with ASEAN.
Do you think Singapore and the ASEAN countries are at some point going to be forced to pick a lane between China and the United States? Because it seems like in the world order today, yes, multipolar, but increasingly sort of like parallel lanes of parallel worlds emerging.
For all 10 Southeast Asian countries, an ascendant China is something we have seen repeatedly in history. So whether you're Thailand or Vietnam or Indonesia, you have a historical memory of China and how it behaves when it is strong. You never want China to be an enemy. It's just tai mafan. Well, it's too big. You don't want to be too close to China either. Because if you're too close, you have no freedom.
Okay.
So the instinct of Southeast Asia is trade is good, investments are good relations are important, but maintain a certain formality
Okay.
and have other friends around. No, Zhu Rongji, China's premier, very wise man. In the year 2000, when ASEAN countries were reeling from the Asian financial crisis, he offered a free trade agreement to ASEAN leaders. I was there in Singapore, year 2000, November. And ASEAN leaders did not know how to react. I was trade minister. The following year, when the trade ministers met in Hernay, I said, China wants it politically. Ask for an early harvest, a concession. Singapore did not benefit because it was for in agriculture and in natural resources.
Right.
Okay.
But I wanted a moral position. That I'm not asking this for Singapore. I'm asking this for the other 9. They agreed. China agreed. Later on, I spoke to Long Yong-tu. Long Yong-tu said, Premier Chu said, whatever ASEAN wanted, give to them. I read it correctly. Then the following year, in Jingbian, we signed a framework agreement. And Zhu Rongji made 2 remarks. He said, if after 10 years the agreement is in China's favor, we will renegotiate it. 这么大方的态度, I couldn't believe it, you know. I said, that's very good. Then he made a second remark, even more important. He said, China does not seek for itself an exclusive position in ASEAN. he meant that we will never ask you to choose your friends, so long as you are my friend. So if the Americans come here and tell us, you choose between China and us, I tell my American friends, you ask that question, you may not like the answer. So I suggest you don't ask that question. So the Americans openly said, we don't ask ASEAN countries to choose, but privately
they do.
on specific issues, they put pressure.
Oh, however, I really like your what you say that because from the historical perspective, the ASEAN countries, they remember when China was powerful, and if you stay too close, you lose freedom. However, if we really look into history, China only had war with Vietnam and Cambodia during the Qing dynasty and Ming dynasty. Ming invaded Vietnam and Qing invaded.
Maintain.
Myanmar. Yes. And besides that, China actually didn't interfere with their local business at all. All the Chinese emperor asked was tribute, and not just very often, but like 1 year or 2 year or 3 year for once. And actually, every time when they go tribute to the emperor gives much more than the tributary. So is it a historical misunderstanding? How is this mentality was formed?
Firstly, the word tribute, is a wrong word for Cao Gong. The leaders of Moscow paid tribute to the Golden Horde.
Oh, sure.
It was a ransom. I give you money so that you protect me and you don't disturb me. Dubrovnik paid tribute to the Sultan, again for protection. The Chinese system was, you Cao Gong, you get trading benefits.
Yeah.
It is not payment.
Yeah.
It is to receive payment
Yes.
in return for respect.
Yes.
Southeast Asian countries realized that in the Chinese mind, face is very important. So whenever they meet Chinese leaders, whenever they come to Beijing, they say such sweet things about China. And Chinese leaders are so happy. They say, well, yeah, they respect us. But when they go back home and they talk to their own people, I know because I talk to them. And they say, no, China is, they don't say bully, but sometimes China puts a lot of pressure on us and they're very tough and so on. It's important for China to understand this.
But what Alba's trying to ask is that where does that perception come from? With the lack of physical war in history, where does that perception come from? Is it self-imposed or how?
You're talking about Southeast Asia or talking about China?
No, Southeast Asia
Southeast
is
Asia.
somewhat sort of like, let's stay slightly away from China. Where does that come from? I wouldn't go as far as use the word fear, but like you described, people are sensitive about their relationship with China.
No, because China is big and China has an enormous market.
Okay.
And if China likes you, it can make you very happy.
Right. Okay.
And if China dislikes you, it can feel a lot of pain.
So it's just a natural progression of power disparity.
No, it's like ordinary people when they meet a very rich man, they behave nice to the rich man because the rich man can give you a hong pao or something and suddenly you're very happy.
Okay.
Or he can take away your license or your rental and then suddenly you're in trouble. And China, in Chinese statecraft, and this is from Ping Fa, never use military force unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And try to achieve your objective without military force. Of course, you need military power, but don't use it. And the best weapon is economic. So when China says, oh, we are in favor of free trade and so on, I said for certain things, China has always used trade for statecraft. When the Americans had the CHIP Act to deny China technology, now think about this. China kept the secret of making paper and the secret of making silk for many centuries. You're not allowed to betray this secret to foreigners. And it gave China a huge advantage. The silk trade, we know, was an important source of revenue. Paper is like today's computer. With paper, you can record, process data, organize more people, regulate flood control,
Sure.
understand climate change. China had a monopoly for centuries. So this gave China an enormous advantage and why it's always been able to organize more people on Earth. So if the Americans say, I don't want to give you trips, I don't want to teach you this or that, of course. Because if China has such knowledge, China will also not want to share with other people. So this is, to me, normal, not unusual. The politicization of trade is also normal. It's not unusual. So relax.
Yeah.
The important thing is we're not killing each other.
Yes.
And that brings us to the end of today's edition of China Now. A big thank you to our panelists, contributors, and of course to you, our viewers, for making the time to join us. Remember, we are here every Saturday at 8 a.m., bringing you fresh insights, bold conversations, and the stories shaping China and its place in the world. Would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your comments, and suggestions through the email provided below. I am Makiza Latifa, and together we'll keep uncovering the stories that shape our world. Until next week, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay inspired.